Hello everyone, I am the Midnight Narrator. I know you use this video to fall asleep to, so before that, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Close your eyes and let the sound of the ocean carry you away. Tonight, I'll tell you the story of the signal. Chapter 1. Static. The radio crackled to life at 3:17 a.m., cutting through the silence of Marcus Chen's cramped studio apartment like a rusty blade. He bolted upright in bed, heart hammering against his ribs. The vintage ham radio he'd inherited from his grandfather sat on the desk across the room, its amber dial glowing like a malevolent eye in the darkness. Anyone out there? Please respond. Coordinates 42.3601 degrees north, 71.0589 degrees west. The voice was distorted, barely human through the static. Marcus stumbled across the room, his bare feet finding every loose floorboard that would betray his movement to the neighbors below. He'd been a licensed amateur radio operator for 3 years, ever since Grandpa Joe passed, but he'd never heard anything like this on the emergency frequencies. "This is KD2GHF responding," Marcus whispered into the microphone, using his call sign. "What's your emergency?" The static grew louder, almost aggressive. Then, cutting through the white noise like ice water through veins. "They're in the walls. Oh God, they're in the walls." The transmission cut to silence. Marcus stared at the radio, his mouth dry. Boston was full of old buildings with thin walls and strange acoustics, but something about that voice made his skin crawl. The coordinates the voice had given, he recognized them. They were somewhere in downtown Boston, not far from his apartment in Somerville. He tried calling back several times, but got no response. Finally, exhaustion won out over curiosity, and he returned to bed. But sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the old brownstone, every distant siren, every whisper of wind against the windows made him think of that desperate voice. They're in the walls. Chapter 2. Investigation. Marcus worked as a freelance audio engineer, which meant his schedule was flexible and his curiosity was occupational. By 10 a.m., he was dressed and driving his beat-up Honda toward downtown Boston, a portable GPS unit showing him the exact location of those coordinates. The address led him to a narrow alley between 2 office buildings in the financial district. Nothing unusual, just brick walls, a few dumpsters, and the kind of urban decay that collected in Boston's forgotten corners. But as he stood there, checking and rechecking his GPS, Marcus noticed something odd. One of the buildings had a basement window that had been bricked over, but recently, the mortar was still light-colored, unstained by weather. More disturbing were the scratch marks in the brick, deep gouges that looked like they'd been made from the inside. "Can I help you?" Marcus spun around. A security guard from one of the office buildings stood at the mouth of the alley, hand resting on his radio. "Oh, sorry," Marcus said, pocketing his GPS. "I'm with the city, checking on some utility issues." The lie came surprisingly easily. The guard's eyes narrowed. "Which department?" Marcus was saved from answering by his phone, buzzing with a text from a client. He used the distraction to wave goodbye and head back to his car, but not before taking a photo of the bricked-over window with his phone. That evening, he researched the address online. The building had been an apartment complex until 6 months ago, when it was sold to a development company. According to city records, the basement had been sealed due to structural concerns. But Marcus found something else in the Boston Globe archives that made his blood run cold. 3 people had gone missing from that building in the month before it was sold. Sarah Mitchell, 23, a graduate student. David Park, 34, a software developer. Maria Santos, 28, a nurse. All 3 had lived in basement apartments. All 3 had simply vanished, leaving behind their belongings, their jobs, their lives. The police had investigated but found no evidence of foul play. The residents had simply disappeared. Marcus stared at his laptop screen until his eyes burned. Then he went to his radio and began scanning the emergency frequencies, hoping to hear that voice again. Chapter 3. Contact. For 3 nights, Marcus monitored the radio. He heard the usual traffic: emergency services, amateur operators, the occasional ship-to-shore communication from Boston Harbor, but nothing from his mysterious contact. On the 4th night, just as he was about to give up and go to bed, the static returned. Day 6, or is it 7? Losing track. Marcus lunged for the microphone. This is KD2GHF. I hear you. What's your location? Who? Who is this? The voice was weaker now, more distorted. My name is Marcus. I got your transmission 4 nights ago. You gave coordinates. I went there. Are you in the building at... He rattled off the address. A long pause filled with nothing but static. Then, you went there? You have to stay away. They know now. They know someone heard. Who knows? What are you talking about? The ones in the walls. They've been here so long, so hungry. We thought it was rats at first. Just rats in the walls. But rats don't whisper your name. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Are you one of the missing residents? Sarah? David? Maria? Sarah's gone. David's gone. I'm what's left of Maria, but not for much longer. They're getting closer. I can hear them moving between the walls, behind the pipes. They're coming for me. Maria, listen to me. I'm going to call the police. Get you help. No! The voice cracked with desperation. The police came before. They didn't hear them. They didn't see them. They just marked us as missing and left. But I know what happened to the others. I found what was left. Marcus gripped the microphone so hard his knuckles went white. What do you mean, what was left? The walls. If you knew where to look, there are gaps. Spaces between the old construction and the new. That's where they live. That's where they take you. And when they're done... The voice dissolved into static. Maria? Maria, are you there? When the voice returned, it was barely a whisper. They're here. The transmission cut to dead silence. Chapter 4. Descent. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He paced his apartment, drank coffee until his hands shook, and tried to convince himself that what he'd heard was a hoax. But he kept thinking about those scratch marks on the bricked-over window, made from the inside. By dawn, he'd made his decision. He gathered his equipment, a portable radio, flashlight, crowbar, and his phone. He also took his grandfather's old service revolver, legally registered, but hadn't been fired in years. Something told him he might need it. The alley looked different in the gray morning light, more sinister. The scratch marks on the brick seemed deeper, and Marcus could swear there were more of them than before. The security guard was nowhere to be seen, probably doing rounds inside the buildings. Marcus worked quickly, using the crowbar to chip away at the relatively fresh mortar around the bricked-over window. The work was harder than he'd expected, and by the time he'd created an opening large enough to squeeze through, his shirt was soaked with sweat. The basement was pitch black and smelled of mold, rot, and something else. Something organic and wrong. Marcus clicked on his flashlight and immediately wished he hadn't. The basement had been divided into apartments, but the walls had been torn open. Not demolished, torn. Chunks of drywall and insulation lay scattered across the floor like the aftermath of an explosion. But it was the walls themselves that made Marcus's throat close with terror. There were spaces between them, gaps where the building's original structure didn't quite meet the modern renovations. And those gaps were just wide enough for something to move through. "Maria?" he called softly. "Maria, are you here?" His voice echoed strangely in the space, as if the walls were absorbing and distorting the sound. He moved deeper into the basement, following what had once been a hallway. His flashlight beam revealed more destroyed walls, more gaps, more evidence of something moving through the spaces where humans weren't meant to go. Then he found the first apartment. Chapter 5. What Remained. The door hung open, twisted on its hinges. Inside, the apartment looked like it had been hit by a tornado. Furniture overturned, belongings scattered, walls punctured by holes that seemed to have been clawed from both sides. But it was what Marcus found in the bedroom that made him drop his flashlight. Clothes were scattered across the floor. A woman's clothes, torn and stained with something dark. In the corner, a purse lay open, its contents spilled. Marcus picked up a wallet with trembling fingers and found a driver's license. Sarah Mitchell, 23. He played his flashlight beam across the walls and saw them, the gaps. They ran like a network through the apartment, connecting to other holes, other spaces. Some were barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Others were larger, and when Marcus shined his light into them, the darkness seemed to swallow the beam entirely. Something rustled in the walls. Marcus grabbed his flashlight and backed toward the door, but the sound followed him, a dry, sliding noise like scales against wood. It was coming from multiple directions now, surrounding him. "Maria?" he whispered. "Here." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through the gaps in the walls. "Down here. What's left of me?" Following the voice, Marcus found a hole in the floor, a ragged opening that led to the sub-basement. The smell rising from below made him gag. But Maria's voice was coming from down there, weak and fading. He lowered himself through the hole. Chapter 6. The Nest. The sub-basement was older than the rest of the building, with stone walls that predated the modern construction above. It had become a maze of passages and chambers, some natural, others carved. And in the center of it all was what Marcus could only think of as a nest. It was built from debris, pieces of wood, fabric, metal, and other things Marcus didn't want to identify. The structure was roughly spherical, about the size of a small room, with multiple entrances that connected to passages leading deeper into the earth. Marcus. Maria's voice was coming from inside the nest. He approached carefully, his gun drawn, though he wasn't sure what good it would do. As he got closer, he could see that the nest was lined with something that looked like silk or webbing, and scattered throughout were personal belongings, wallets, jewelry, phones, the possessions of the missing. Maria, where are you? Here. What they left. Marcus found the source of the voice in a small chamber behind the main nest. What he saw there made him understand why the police had found no bodies. Maria Santos was still alive, but barely. She was embedded in the wall itself, surrounded by the same silk-like substance that lined the nest. Only her head and one arm were free, and she was holding an old transistor radio, the source of her transmissions. "They keep us alive," she whispered, her voice matching the distorted tone he'd heard over the radio. "Feed on us slowly. Sarah lasted 3 months. David, almost 4. I've been here 6. Marcus fought down his horror and reached for her free hand. Her skin was cold, waxy. "I'm getting you out of here." "Can't. Tried so many times. It's grown into me now. Part of me. But you can do something else." Her eyes, still bright with desperate intelligence, focused on his. "You can make sure others don't end up like us." "What are they? What did this to you?" "Old," she whispered. "So old. They were here before the city, before the buildings, living in the spaces between things, in the cracks and gaps. But when they started renovating the building, sealing up the old ways, the creatures got hungry. Desperate. Something moved in the darkness beyond the nest." Marcus spun around, raising his flashlight and gun, but saw nothing. "They're coming back," Maria said. "They hunt at night, but they always come back here. This is their place." "How many?" "Don't know. They're hard to see. They move through spaces you don't think anything could fit through. But Marcus..." Her grip on his hand tightened with surprising strength. "There's something else. Something worse." Chapter 7. The Truth. "What do you mean?" Marcus whispered, acutely aware of sounds echoing through the passages around them. Scraping, sliding, whispers that might have been wind but sounded too much like voices. "The building above," Maria continued, her voice growing weaker. "They're not just renovating it. They're connecting it to other buildings, creating a network. More spaces between the walls, more places to hide, more ways to hunt." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "How many buildings?" "All of them. The whole financial district. They've been planning this for months, working with the creatures. The development company. They know. They're not victims, Marcus. They're partners." "That's impossible. People wouldn't..." "Wouldn't they?" Maria's laugh was bitter. "What's a few missing persons compared to billions in real estate? The creatures just want food and places to live. The developers want to control the most valuable land in Boston. It's a perfect partnership." The sounds in the darkness were getting closer now. Marcus could hear breathing that wasn't quite human, the scrape of claws on stone. "You have to get out," Maria whispered. Tell people. Warn them. The grand opening of the new shopping complex is next week. Hundreds of people will be in those buildings, and by then the network will be complete. I'm not leaving you here. I'm already dead, Marcus. Have been for months, but you... She pressed something into his hand, a small digital recorder. I documented everything, every sound, every day. It's all on here. The first creature appeared at the edge of his flashlight beam. Chapter 8. The Hunt. It was like nothing Marcus had ever seen or imagined. Roughly humanoid, but wrong in every proportion. Too tall, too thin, joints that bent in impossible directions. Its skin was pale and translucent, showing dark veins beneath. But it was the way it moved that made Marcus's mind rebel, flowing through spaces that should have been too small, compressing and expanding like liquid. More appeared behind the first. They moved silently, surrounding the nest, but they seemed to be waiting for something. They won't attack while I'm here, Maria whispered. Some kind of territorial thing. But once you leave... Marcus understood. The creatures were waiting for him to go so they could finish what they'd started with Maria. The recorder, she pressed. Take it. Get out. Tell the world. But Marcus was looking at something else. The transistor radio in Maria's hand. An idea was forming. Desperate and probably suicidal. But it was the only chance he could think of. Maria, what frequency are you broadcasting on? Emergency band, 146.52. Why? Are there other radios down here, from the other victims? Yes, in the nest. But Marcus, what are you... He was already moving, pushing past the waiting creatures. They hissed and retreated but didn't attack. Yet. In the nest, he found what he was looking for. David's phone, still partially charged, and Sarah's small emergency radio. Working quickly, he set all three devices to the same frequency and turned up the volume. What are you doing? Maria called. Making some noise, Marcus replied, then spoke into his own radio. Emergency, emergency. This is KD2GHF, broadcasting from coordinates 42.3601 degrees north, 71.0589 degrees west. Multiple casualties in underground tunnel system. Request immediate emergency response. Police, fire, EMT. We have people trapped underground. The radios created a feedback loop, amplifying and rebroadcasting the message. The sound echoed through the stone passages, and Marcus saw the creatures recoil from the noise. Chapter 9. Emergency response. The creatures didn't like the sound. That much was obvious. They hissed and retreated deeper into the tunnels, their pale forms disappearing into gaps Marcus hadn't even noticed. But he knew they'd be back. Clever, Maria said weakly. But it won't keep them away for long. Marcus continued broadcasting, repeating the emergency message and their location. He also began recording everything with his phone. The creatures, the nest, Maria's condition, everything. If he didn't make it out, maybe someone would find the evidence. Above ground, he could hear sirens approaching. The emergency broadcast had worked, but would the responders be able to find them? And more importantly, would they believe what they found? Marcus, Maria's voice was barely audible now. The development company, Blackstone Urban Development. The CEO is named Harrison Webb. He knows about the creatures. He's been feeding them. How do you know? I saw him. before they took me. He came down here with plans, blueprints, showing them how the tunnel system would connect to other buildings. They understand more than you'd think. The sirens were getting closer. Marcus could hear voices in the alley above, people searching for the source of the emergency broadcast. But he could also hear the creatures moving in the darkness, growing bolder as they realized the humans above were coming closer. "Here!" Marcus shouted upward. "Down here!" "In the basement." His voice carried up through the gaps in the building, and soon he heard boots on the floor above, then the sound of people working to widen the hole he'd made in the basement window. Sir, can you hear me?" A firefighter's voice, professional and calm. "Down here. In the sub-basement. We need medical assistance." But as the rescue team worked to reach them, Marcus saw something that made his heart stop. The creatures weren't retreating anymore. They were surrounding the nest, moving with purpose, and their attention wasn't focused on him anymore. They were looking up toward the sounds of the rescue team above. "Oh God," Marcus whispered, understanding. "They're not afraid of being discovered. They're excited." Chapter 10. The Trap. "What do you mean?" Maria asked, though her voice suggested she already knew. "This is what they want. More people coming down here. The emergency response. We're not being rescued. We're bait." The realization hit him like ice water. The creatures had let him find Maria, let him make contact, let him call for help. They wanted the rescue team to come down here. Above, Marcus could hear the rescue team making progress. They'd widened the window opening and were setting up equipment to rappel down to the basement level. Standard urban rescue procedure. But they had no idea what they were walking into. "How many are up there?" Marcus called to them. "Full team," came the reply. "Fire, police, EMT, we're coming down to get you." Marcus keyed his radio again, this time broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. "All units, stay back. Do not enter the building. This is a trap. The basement is not safe." But it was too late. The first firefighter was already rappelling down through the window. The creatures moved. Marcus had thought they were slow, careful hunters that relied on stealth and the advantage of their unnatural habitat. He was wrong. When they wanted to be fast, they were lightning. The first firefighter never knew what hit him. One moment he was descending on his rope, the next he was gone, pulled sideways into one of the gaps in the wall. His scream cut off with horrible abruptness. "Jimmy!" another firefighter called. "Jimmy, respond!" Marcus keyed his radio. Get out now. Don't come down here." But the rescue team couldn't hear his small handheld radio over their own communications. And now they thought one of their own was in trouble. More were coming down. Chapter 11. Feeding Time. What followed was a nightmare of sound and shadow. The creatures moved through their network of gaps and passages like water through pipes, appearing and disappearing, striking and retreating. The rescue team's lights created wild, swinging shadows that made it impossible to track the attackers. Marcus pressed himself against the wall near Maria's chamber, trying to stay out of the way while still documenting everything with his phone. The creatures seemed to have forgotten about him entirely. They had bigger prey now. 5 missing, he heard someone report over the radio. Repeat, 5 personnel unaccounted for. Seal the building, came the response. Nobody else goes in. But Marcus could hear sounds from above. The creatures were moving up through the walls, following the passages that connected to the main building. They weren't just hunting in the basement anymore. Maria, he whispered, is there another way out? The storm drains, she said weakly. Behind the nest, they connect to the city's sewer system. But Marcus, you have to do something else first. What? The gas line for the building's heating system. It runs right through here. She managed to lift her free hand and point to a section of wall where Marcus could see pipes running through gaps in the stone. If you could rupture it. Marcus understood immediately. The building above was being evacuated, but the creatures were already spreading through the walls into other buildings. The only way to stop them was to destroy their nest, their network of passages. But you're still connected to this place. If I rupture the gas line... I told you, I'm already dead. Have been for months, but this way I can take them with me. Above, Marcus could hear explosions, not bombs, but the sound of walls being blown out from the inside. The creatures were expanding their territory, creating new passages, new hunting grounds. The whole financial district, Maria whispered. By morning it'll all be connected. One giant nest. Marcus looked at the gas line, then at his gun. One shot in the right place. Do it, Maria said. Chapter 12. Fire and Revelation. Marcus aimed carefully at the gas pipe. He could already smell the leak. His shot had only to widen it enough to create a real hazard. Wait, Maria said suddenly. The recorder. Did you get the recorder? Marcus checked his pocket. The small digital device was still there, along with his phone full of video evidence. Got it. Good. There's something else on there. Something I recorded before they caught me. A conversation between Harrison Webb and someone else. Someone in the mayor's office. What kind of conversation? About the urban renewal project. About how the creatures were going to solve Boston's homeless problem, its overcrowding problem, its affordable housing problem. Make people disappear, Marcus. Make them disappear without anyone asking too many questions. Marcus felt sick. How many people are they planning to... All of them. Everyone who doesn't matter to the city's image. The poor, the mentally ill, the addicts, the elderly. Feed them to the creatures and build luxury condos on top. It's ethnic cleansing, Marcus. But nobody will call it that because there won't be any bodies to find. Above, the sounds of destruction were getting worse. Emergency vehicles were fleeing the area as entire sections of buildings collapsed inward, creating new passages for the creatures. Shoot the pipe, Maria said. End this. Marcus took aim, then hesitated. What about you? I've been dead for 6 months, Marcus. This is just making it official. He fired. The explosion wasn't immediate. First came the hiss of escaping gas, then the slow buildup of pressure as the gas mixed with air in the enclosed space. Marcus had maybe 30 seconds. Go! Maria shouted, her voice stronger than it had been in hours. The storm drain. Marcus ran. Chapter 13. Underground. The storm drain was a narrow concrete tunnel that led away from the building. Marcus crawled through it on his hands and knees, his phone's flashlight barely illuminating the way ahead. Behind him, he could hear the gas building up pressure, and beyond that, the sounds of creatures moving through the walls. He was 50 yards away when the building exploded. The shockwave knocked him flat and filled the tunnel with dust and debris. For a moment, Marcus thought he was buried alive. But then he felt air moving past his face. The tunnel was still open ahead. He crawled for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, finally emerging through a storm grate into an alley 6 blocks away. Above ground, he could see the glow of fires in the financial district. Emergency vehicles were everywhere, and news helicopters circled like vultures. Marcus sat on the curb and checked his phone. The battery was at 12%, but the video files were intact. He also had Maria's digital recorder, with whatever conversation she'd captured between Webb and the city official. He needed to get this information to someone who would believe it and act on it. But who? The police might be compromised. Maria had mentioned someone in the mayor's office. The media would think he was crazy without more proof. Then he remembered something. His grandfather's contacts in the amateur radio community. Ham radio operators were a tight-knit group, and many of them were retired cops, firefighters, and military personnel. People who knew how to investigate, how to ask the right questions. Marcus found a 24-hour internet cafe and uploaded everything to a secure server, then sent the links to every ham radio operator in his grandfather's contact list with a simple message: emergency. Please verify and distribute. Lives depend on it. Chapter 14. Aftermath. By dawn, the financial district was a disaster zone. 3 buildings had collapsed entirely, and several others had been evacuated due to structural damage. The official story was a gas leak explosion, but witnesses reported seeing people disappear into walls, hearing voices from impossible places. Marcus watched the news coverage from his apartment, monitoring the ham radio frequencies. The amateur radio community was buzzing with activity as operators around the country began investigating his claims. Within hours, they'd found records of similar disappearances in other cities where Blackstone Urban Development had projects. Seattle, Portland, Denver, all had seen upticks in missing persons reports in areas where Blackstone was doing urban renewal. By afternoon, the FBI had taken over the investigation from local authorities. But Marcus knew it wasn't over. The explosion had destroyed the nest under the financial district. But Maria had said the creatures were old, that they'd been here before the city. If some had survived, they would rebuild elsewhere. His radio crackled to life. CQ, this is W1AW calling CQ emergency traffic. Marcus recognized the call sign. W1AW was the official station of the American Radio Relay League, the national amateur radio organization. This is KD2GHF, Marcus responded. Marcus, we've been trying to reach you. We've been monitoring the situation in Boston. Are you safe? For now. We've been in contact with several federal agencies. Your evidence has been verified. Harrison Webb was arrested this morning, along with 3 city officials. But we need to ask you something. What? Are you willing to go to Washington? There are people who need to hear your story in person. Marcus looked out his window towards downtown Boston, where smoke was still rising from the ruins. Somewhere in that devastation, Maria Santos had finally found peace. But somewhere else, in other cities, other nests were growing. "Yes," he said. "I'll go." Chapter 15. Conspiracy. The briefing room in the FBI's Boston field office was crowded with people Marcus didn't recognize. Federal agents, city officials, and several individuals in expensive suits who didn't introduce themselves, but took notes on everything he said. Marcus told his story from the beginning, playing the audio recordings and video evidence. When Maria's voice came through the speakers, describing the creatures and their partnership with the development company, several people in the room exchanged glances that suggested this wasn't entirely news to them. "Mr. Chen," said Agent Patricia Reeves, who seemed to be running the meeting, "how much of this did you share with the amateur radio community?" "Everything," Marcus replied. "It's already spread to operators in dozens of states." One of the men in suits, Marcus suspected he was CIA or NSA, leaned forward. "That's unfortunate. This situation requires a delicate approach." "Delicate?" Marcus couldn't keep the anger out of his voice. "People are being eaten alive. There's nothing delicate about that." "Mr. Chen," Agent Reeves said calmly, "what you discovered in Boston is not an isolated incident. We've been aware of these entities for some time, but public panic would only make the situation worse." Marcus stared at her. "You knew? You knew about the creatures and you let people die?" "We've been working on containment protocols. The situation in Boston got out of hand because local officials acted without federal oversight." Containment? Marcus thought about Maria, embedded in the wall of that underground chamber. These things can't be contained. They need to be destroyed. "That's where you're wrong," said the man in the suit. "They can be very useful if properly managed." The room went silent. Marcus felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "What do you mean, useful?" Agent Reeves shot a warning look at the man in the suit, but he continued anyway. "Urban renewal, Mr. Chen. Population control. Crime reduction. These entities solve a lot of problems if they're directed properly." Marcus stood up so fast his chair fell over. "You're talking about murder, mass murder." "We're talking about evolution," the man replied calmly. "Humanity has to adapt to share the planet with other forms of intelligent life." "Get out," Marcus said quietly. "Excuse me." "Get out!" Marcus shouted. "All of you." "This meeting is over." Agent Reeves stood up. "Mr. Chen, you need to understand." But Marcus was already heading for the door. As he left, he heard the man in the suit say, "He's going to be a problem." Chapter 16. Going public. Marcus didn't go home. Instead, he drove straight to the offices of the Boston Globe, where he'd found the original stories about the missing persons. If the federal government was compromised, he needed to go public with everything. The reporter who'd written the original articles was named Jennifer Walsh, and she was skeptical until Marcus showed her the video footage. The sight of Maria Santos embedded in the wall, still alive after 6 months, made Walsh turn pale. If this is real..." "It's real," Marcus said. "And it's happening in other cities too. The amateur radio community has been investigating. We've found similar patterns everywhere Blackstone Urban Development has projects. Walsh was already reaching for her phone. I need to call my editor. This is front-page material. But when she dialed, there was no answer. She tried the main newsroom number, then her editor's cell phone. Nothing. That's strange, she said. It's the middle of the day. Someone should be... Her phone rang. When she answered, Marcus could hear an unfamiliar voice on the other end, though he couldn't make out the words. Walsh's face went white. I understand, she said, and hung up. What was that about? I've been reassigned, effective immediately. Some story in Washington. Marcus felt a chill. They got to your paper. That's impossible. The Globe is independent. Is it? Who owns it now? What about the parent company's government contracts? Walsh was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, there might be another way. Independent media, blogs, podcasts, social media. If we can get the story out there fast enough to enough people. Do it, Marcus said. I'll keep working the radio networks. Between traditional media and amateur radio, we can reach millions of people. But as they worked through the afternoon, uploading videos and sending files, Marcus noticed something disturbing. Posts were disappearing almost as fast as they went up. Videos were being flagged as misinformation and removed. Social media accounts were being suspended. Someone with serious resources was working to suppress the story. Chapter 17. Underground Network. By evening, it was clear that traditional channels weren't going to work. Every major news outlet had killed the story, citing lack of credible evidence. Social media platforms were removing content faster than it could be posted. But the amateur radio community was harder to suppress. Ham radio operators around the country had taken up Marcus's cause, using their networks to spread information that couldn't be censored by internet companies or government agencies. The story was spreading through a medium that predated the internet, one that couldn't be easily controlled. Marcus was back in his apartment, coordinating with operators in different time zones, when his radio crackled with an unexpected transmission. KD2GHF, this is K9ZZZ, emergency traffic. Marcus recognized the call sign. It belonged to Robert Bob Harrison, a retired FBI agent who'd become a prominent voice in the amateur radio community after leaving the Bureau. This is KD2GHF. Go ahead, Bob. Marcus, I've been investigating your story through my old contacts. What you've uncovered is bigger than you know. There's a whole department inside the federal government dedicated to managing these entities. Managing them how? Using them for population control, just like you heard in that meeting. But it goes deeper than that. They're not just working with creatures like the ones in Boston. They've made contact with other species, other forms of non-human intelligence. Marcus felt the world tilt around him. How many other forms? I don't know. But Marcus, there's something else. Your location has been compromised. There are federal agents heading to your apartment right now. Marcus looked out his window and saw black SUVs pulling up to his building. I have to run, he said into the microphone. Wait, Bob's voice crackled back. There's a network of people who've been preparing for this. People who know the truth about what the government has been hiding. We can help you, but you have to trust us. How do I know you're not one of them? Because they killed my partner 20 years ago when he tried to expose a similar operation in New Mexico. I've been waiting for someone like you, Marcus. Someone with evidence they can't suppress. There was pounding on Marcus's door. Federal agents, open up! Marcus grabbed his radio, his grandfather's gun, and the backup copies of all his evidence. There was a fire escape outside his bedroom window, if he could make it there. Bob, are you still there? I'm here, Marcus.